Welcome to episode number 7 of the Stick to F1 podcast. It is Jason Myrtetus, it is Anthony Mingioni, and we are back, and it is the week of the British Grand Prix. Ant, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Looking forward to what will be a very different weekend ahead of us in terms of structure of this upcoming Grand Prix with qualifying and obviously the sprint race, and we're going to get into that today as well.
Yeah. What did you feel like last weekend when there was no race after the triple header? It was a little weird. It was a little empty.
It was a little empty, but because, I was on vacation, you were here. So for me, I was probably busy running around with kids and family and beach and stuff like that. So it was perfect timing for me, knowing that I was going to be back in time for the British Grand Prix at home. But I think if I was at home, it would have felt weirder.
Yeah. You kind of settled into those 3 races in a row to the rhythm of the weekend with Friday practice, free practice 1 and 2, and then Saturday and qualifying, and then waking up on Sunday for the race. But there was none last weekend, but the Grand Prix is back this weekend. It's the granddaddy in a lot of ways at Silverstone. Going to be 140,000 people there at Silverstone. I'm surprised that they haven't kind of backed off on that in any way, shape, or form, but the money's probably already in the bank. And they are taking a lot of precautions when it comes to either vaccinated or negative tests to be there. So it's going to be an electric atmosphere, no doubt, with a huge race on tap to boot.
Absolutely. And considering the fact that Mercedes, I believe, has won the last 5, maybe a lot more than that. With the actual British Grand Prix, not counting Max's 70th, winning the 70th last year, but the actual British Grand Prix has been home cooking for Mercedes. But that is very much in question now.
Well, remember last year at the British Grand Prix, prior to Max's win for the 70th, how Lewis blew his tire out and had such a lead he could still finish.
Yes.
And tire dag and tire wear was on full display at Silverstone.
Yes, absolutely. And that's something that will have to be taken into account going into this weekend as well. But it's a very different world for Mercedes, though, coming into this race. But tire degradation is always a concern. Again, a more technical track than obviously what we saw the last 2 weeks in Austria, which again, it has its own. Austria has its own technicalities, but there's a lot more to consider when you're at Silverstone.
The other part of it too, with this Grand Prix, is going to be interesting because I thought last year in the 70th Grand Prix, that was a moment where Max said, you know what, if we're ever going to get Mercedes, we have to not only run our race, but we can't back off. Because I remember he went on team radio and they asked him to kind of slow his pace a little bit. And he said, I'm never this close to the Mercedes. I'm not driving like a grandma. He said it on his team radio and ended up winning the race. And this year, obviously, the quality of the car and the machinery is tipped in the favor of Red Bull. But Mercedes is going to bring some upgrades to this track. And we got to see what these upgrades actually accomplish. Because, in Austria, in that second race, the Austrian Grand Prix that Max won easily again, they went to a lower engine mode in that race and still ran away with it.
Basically walked with that race in a rocking chair in the Austrian Grand Prix. So, yeah, I mean, we've heard enough lip service, I think, from Mercedes in terms of their concern about, their issues on the straights over the last several weeks. Lewis has talked about, Hamilton's talked about, how they just, having such struggles with pace, and they're not necessarily sure that they're going to be able to, be able to keep up with, if it comes down to that for them, it's going to be difficult. But again, Silverstone has its ways of surprising you. It can, especially when you get into certain stretches of that track. But I have a tough time the way that Red Bull is rolling right now to look at them and say that I don't think they're going to be, especially if you use that 70th Grand Prix last year. That's the Max Verstappen we have seen since since Baku. This is what we've seen out of him consistently, pretty much in every race, and we got a flash of last year. So Max is fully confident, I think, on that. Is fully confident on being able to take this race on that track.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because there is a lot of straight line speed. 80% of the lap take at Silverstone is taken flat out. So there's a lot of high-end speed at the track. And, the last couple of years there's been a decent amount of overtakes there. It's not known as an overtaking track because there's a lot of technical areas to it. So it's going to be interesting. And then couple that with, obviously, the sprint race. And, they're not going to have a lot of, practice before qualifying here. The race weekend is so different this weekend. You have free practice on Friday. And then I guess is the qualifying on Friday for the sprint race?
The qualifying is on Friday, sprint race is Saturday, and then the race is Sunday. That's the structure. Free practice, I believe, is now going to be on. The free practice now will start on basically, I believe, tomorrow. Let me check the schedule here. I believe that is let me see, qualifying. Yeah, Friday still is FP. They still have Friday qualifying. Friday is FP1, then qualifying. Then the structure is FP2 on Saturday.
And then the sprint race.
And then the sprint race. That is the structure for this. It's about 100 kilometers.
17 laps.
Yeah. 17 lap race. They're anticipating around 25 to 30 minutes for this race, sprint.
Yeah, and everybody I think is going to be on the soft compound tire for the sprint race, and there's no pit. I mean, you could, but what's the point?
You could, but yeah, it would be pretty pointless at 17 laps, to do that. So the anticipation is just going to be exactly what it's going to be. Is if you got runners at the starting block and you go until you reach the checkered flag.
Just for our North American audience, FP1 is going to be Friday at 9:30 a.m. Qualifying then at 1 o'clock Friday. And then practice 2 on Saturday, 7 a.m., and the sprint qualifying race will be at 11:30, and then the race 10 o'clock. We get a little reprieve here in North America for the British Grand Prix. And we'll see. Max is the last guy to win on this track. We'll see if he's able to do it again. And, when you look at this track, too, it's the home race for a lot of guys. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton, and we know what's on the line for him when, you look at these driver standings. I mean, it's a situation right now where Max got this 32-point lead on Lewis Hamilton, but sitting in fourth, just 3 points back at third, is Lando Norris. A home race for him as well. I expect to see another good showing from McLaren.
I do, but again, we also have to keep in mind, I think that Austria really worked to Lando Norris's particular skill set. It really did. And his performance, and again, I think he's had a very interesting week. We all know, obviously, the news, obviously, what happened at Wembley Stadium after during the Euro tournament, where he, basically had his watch stolen from him. He was a little bit shaken up, obviously, from.
Yeah, he got mugged.
Got mugged, basically, and he's still young, and these are things that you have to kind of put those things behind you, but. You are a human being at the end of the day. It all comes down to how this become super laser focused on Silverstone, which is what you would certainly hope to see there, or again, how well also that McLaren car does on at the track at Silverstone. So there's some interesting things here with Norris where. Unlike it at the Red Bull Ring, I'm not necessarily as high up on the ladder there where I'm thinking he's going to be on a podium. He could, and that would be a real statement for McLaren to be able to end up on the podium again if they can do that this weekend.
Yeah, and we have our pick the podium. We'll find out who you have up there, but it's going to be really, really interesting to see whose car works at this track. And McLaren in the constructors right now is third, 141 points. They're 19 points up on Ferrari. Do you expect Ferrari to have a good weekend? To me, I'm looking at Ferrari and I'm going, I have no idea what to expect.
We never know, and we never know. We assume that they were going to, they did well. Their pattern this year is they did well on city circuits so far, but there's not a ton of those. On this track, I'm just not as certain for them. They could be. Charles could just. He's had some good performances of late. I thought he fought back well in Austria. But this is a different. Again, this is a different track. I think they could challenge anywhere from being in the. I think the fourth, fifth. They could be fourth or fifth, but they could be out of the points. I just don't know, Jace. I just don't know.
I think they qualify well, and they may perform pretty well in that sprint race. But tire degradation has been a huge issue for them.
Yes.
And it's been it's been kind of an Achilles heel. We saw them run their tires out a few times, pitting earlier than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And if the tire, and they're running new compounds this weekend too. That's the other part of it. This is a different tire that they tried out a couple weeks ago in Austria, and with Pirelli. So there's so many variables here. I just don't know, what they're going to do to their tires in this race. I'm really struggling to kind of figure out. You figure Max and Red Bull and Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas are going to be at the top, but where's that next group coming in? Is it AlphaTauri?
Possible. Again, we'll be seeing Yuki Tsunoda for the first time. He's had some struggles of late. Certainly, Austria did not play well with the Red Bull ring at all. So I'm going to be curious. But Tsunoda has had some pretty decent performances this season, with a couple of weeks to kind of reset himself. That's a possibility. I think we could potentially see a rebound of form for him. Gasly has been fairly consistent. He's in the points pretty much almost all the time. He could be a surprise. I think there's a possibility there for Gasly maybe to sneak in there if some of the others are slipping, for that to occur. And it seems like, again, Honda's had a great, for the most part, it's been a great year for Honda. Let's face it.
Yeah,
it's been a great year, and it's not just because of Max's performances as well. It's been, across the board. I think the AlphaTauri has been pretty solid this year.
I think Alpine's gonna have a good weekend. Fernando's been good all year.
Mm-hmm.
Ocon needed a reset in a big way.
Huge reset. Oh
Yeah.
man, Austria was a disaster for him. We've talked about this
France
in the previous
too.
show.
Yeah.
France, everything. Ever since the 3-year deal was signed, he has had that 3-week stretch. He just could not get out of his own way. There are other circumstances as well. Getting not even getting out of turn one in Austria was a real rough go for him.
Yeah.
He was a DNF there. So I'd like to see Ocon be able to make that rebound race. I really do. I just don't. Again, it's another one I just don't know about. Seeing Fernando back there is going to be. He's one of those. I could actually see Fernando with a good weekend, finishing the highest he's finished this season. I could easily see that. I think that the Renault perform. I think it's that Renault engine might suit them well. I think Fernando, being back there kind of galvanizes as well. It's a chance. I could see that, Jason.
Okay. The sprint race, here's the deal with the sprint race. So they're going to qualify for the sprint race. It's going to be normal qualifying, basically, with 3 sessions, Q1, Q2, Q3. And then the sprint race, as you mentioned, going to be that 17 laps, 1,000 kilometers. And are we going to be saying on Sunday when we tape the post-race British Grand Prix episode that we liked the sprint race or we didn't like it?
Is that entirely up to the driver's performance?
Yeah, it's such a I'm just wondering what we're going to see. Are we going to see a line and no risk, or are we going to see a lot of risk at the back of the field trying to move up midfield?
That's what Lewis Hamilton seems to think. He says he thinks it's going to turn into a train. That was his quote. Does he thinks this race is going to turn into a train? That maybe you're right. Maybe the back end, you get an Ocon. Let's use him for example. If he feels like in a short race he may be able to move up spots that he wouldn't necessarily have in his qualifying run, which again, qualifying hasn't helped him at all of late. That you could potentially see that. I could see a guy like Stroll potentially jumping up a few. Seb could do that. That might be a case where, especially where, let's face it, if there's any home team at this race, it's Aston Martin. They're literally a few miles away from Silverstone.
Yeah.
They're the closest of all of them. So we haven't really seen as much from Seb since Baku. He's had decent runs, but again, we all saw what happened with him and Raikkonen at the end of the previous race. So it's that midfield. I think everybody's waiting to see what that midfield fight will be.
Yeah, guys know too, if you can move up into the top 2 rows some way. If a guy like Ricciardo is sitting there, starting off 7th in the sprint race, he may see that as an opportunity to get up to the front 2 rows and change his fortunes for Sunday. It's going to be really interesting. I just don't know the approach to it in this situation. Guys burning out your tires real early could be an issue if you cook them up too quick.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many variables here. It's going to be fascinating. After the British Grand Prix, one more race before the summer break. They're going to head to Hungary, and then the summer break's going to take place for a couple of weeks. We're going to have a few weeks off. Then we're going to head to Belgium, visit Spa, which is always one of those great ones on the calendar. Then they're going to head to Zandvoort in the Netherlands. Monza after that, head to Sochi and go to Russia. Then Turkey's been added, Japan, United States, Mexico, Brazil, to be determined in Saudi Arabia, and then they're going to end in Abu Dhabi. We'll see how that plays out. But one of the things that, with this schedule coming up has been a lot of conjecture about the driver market. And George Russell's obviously been front and center in that with Mercedes. There were some reports that they're going to announce it here, but I was listening to George Russell on F1 Nation, the podcast, and he basically said that they're not going to announce anything at Silverstone. That I don't know if he was just being coy. He seemed pretty forthright in the interview. He said he hadn't signed anything to this date. But do you expect an announcement this weekend?
I don't. I really don't. I think at this point right now, it's been such a deluge of of news and information that's been coming out, all week long, prepping for this. You have, other announcements that were made as well. The sprint race, it's almost like, I think, as much as it would make sense to make that announcement at the British Grand Prix, I think it is going to be one of those things where if they do make the announcement, it's going to be before the break. And I think what the thinking here for Mercedes is, we're in a tough fight right now. And let's face it, last race, Valtteri Bottas got us P2. We may not win this, but I think they want to believe that they want to have both drivers fully engaged.
Yeah.
It's not to say Valtteri wouldn't be, and hey, if he ends up going to free agency, that he wouldn't be coming on like a house of fire. But I do think there's a delicate balance here that Mercedes has to make here, and I think if you're doing it over the summer break, there's time to absorb that information.
Yep. Emotion can settle, and they can make that determination. And again, the market is so much determined, I think, in many ways by the upcoming cost cap for next year. Yep.
How do you want to structure your teams? How do you want to spend your money now that you are limited as to how much you could spend your money on? And Mercedes, is it a decision where, again, they know what they have? They have a known quality in Valtteri Bottas. They have a known quality. They know if he's re-signed, it comes down to, again, what that contract structure is, what he would be considered to be fair market value for a racer of his caliber.
Yep.
But you also have all the behind the scenes engineering work that has to be done. All trying to make sure you have obviously the best staff on hand to put together this car for the brand new car for next year.
Yeah, I think it complicates things. It's one of the reasons why I think Red Bull will definitely sign Sergio is because of the development of next year's car.
I think so too. The question is going to be, I think Sergio is not going to want a 1-year deal this time. That's where things are going to be. That's where I think it gets complicated a little bit for Red Bull, and why they haven't made any sort of move just yet to sign him completely. I'm sure there's conversations, they have parameters of what the deal might be, but I think you have to, they want to kind of still give this a little bit more time and know that, they could get the deal done with Sergio later on after they have a little bit more info on him versus Gasly. Or again, as we all saw, and I don't know if this is smoke and mirrors for negotiation part, George Russell as well. So say, that's something that came up during the week, and is whether or not that's just, Red Bull, whether or not that's Red Bull just kind of
head games,
turning the screw on to force Mercedes into a decision that they're not yet ready to make. But again, that could be a major consideration. But I think we're looking at things from a cost perspective. At a certain point, if you're Mercedes going into next season, you have to balance out going straight into the new schedule, or it's going straight into the new season with a brand new car. Do you want to have two experienced hands who have been successful, or are you willing to sort of take the risk and say, we're going to take a risk on George's potential, even with a brand new car?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the variable. But I think that with George's contract being out at Williams this year, I think that they're just going to have to. They're going to have to make the leap at this time because
I'm
there's
leaning
going to be
that
other
way.
suitors. There's going to be, and the interesting. There's been some conjecture that Bottas could go back to Williams or Gasly could go to Williams. All of a sudden, with the cost cap, and it's going to bring everything closer together. And with that team being sold, money's not an issue anymore like it was. And now all of a sudden, Williams is really has developed their car this year to a much better, higher standard, and from all accounts, they're really moving in a good direction. They got good people there.
Yeah. The influx, I think, from Doralton Ventures certainly has helped them majorly. They have money now that they didn't have before. Again, it's a shame last week that George was not able to get into the points finally.
Yep.
In that car, but it was, I think, a really good step forward for Williams. And it could very well, with a cost cap world, again, if Val's is out of a seat, he knows Williams. Again, there's still a lot of people who work on that team who were there when he was there. So there will be a comfort level for him. There is the engine itself. It's a Mercedes engine, so it doesn't, in this circumstance, it's not, the main one that's done for AMG's engine, but it's still, the model's pretty much basically the same. And again, I do think that we're going to see more of a majority next year of teams trying to have maybe a veteran hand with a younger driver, and they want to kind of keep that way. Unless, of course, we're talking about Alpha or Haas, who, again, they're trying to, they're like the Kansas City Roy, think of a developmental team that gets a player to a certain point and then they sign their major free agent contract.
Yeah.
So it's all up to it, but I do think there's more of a potential in a cost cap world where we might see a chance of a veteran driver with a younger driver, especially if you've got eyes on making this whole series more of a fight.
Yeah, I was reading a piece about Mazepan and Haas, and his father is a Russian oligarch.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interest, and he's a gajillionaire, in him buying the team, firing Gunther Steiner, because he doesn't like the way that Gunter has talked to Nikita. It's like, wow, man, there's a lot of drama.
Gunter's going to be Gunter at the end of the day. And that's exactly the way he should be. And I think you would say that this is part of the growing up process. If you are, and the problem is going to be is, again, with that company, with Uralkali, which is a potash company, it's like it's all kinds of stuff that goes on. I was talking to my family who are also have a lot of Russian family, and it's a pretty big company over in Russia. His father is a shareholder, and that does, much like Lance Stroll's father Lawrence, he calls the shots. He'll hold that seat he'll hold that seat for a long time. If they're going to be the teammate, you always have to know that Nikita is going to be sort of viewed in a certain way. And the whole Mazda spin, which I thought was a lighthearted thing, and if they're taking issue or umbrage with that, that's not a good sign in my mind. In terms of, that says to me that, okay, Nikita's up. If there's issues with that, if that's true, and there's issues with that, then that just confirms to me that he's up way too soon.
Yeah, he's not ready for where he is.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at our F101 in this episode, because we did tire degradation a while back, but let's talk about penalty points, because you alluded to it before, and it's been in the headlines in regards to F1 because Lando Norris has 10 penalty points. If you get to 20 penalty points, then you have to sit out the next Grand Prix. It's basically the way it works. Now, the stewards for on-track infractions during qualifying, whatever practice, can give you the penalty. They decide whether it gets points or not. So any driver who racks up 12 penalty points over the course of a 12-month period, doesn't have to be in season, earns an automatic race ban for the following race. And I know that McLaren, it's been rumored that if they do get into this situation and Lando does have to miss a race, it looks like Nico Hulkenberg would be the driver to come in and sit in his race car. No driver has ever reached the 12-point mark, but he's kind of knocking on the door. A couple of points are going to come off after this week, but he's in very tenuous territory. I mean, the only other guy Perez has 8. Kimi's got 6, along with George Russell, Vettel, and Latifi. Then Giovinazzi's got 5. Mazepan's got 5. And then some other guys, and one guy not listed on here at all is actually Max Verstappen, who was in a penalty point situation earlier in his career. But I guess when you're leading, you don't get into a lot of situations.
Precisely, you're not getting into those the elbows out and getting into dangerous territory. It's always going to be someone. It's always going to be someone closer to the middle of the pack. And again, as you stated, Lando already has 2 points coming off, but he's still in that 8-point range, and we still got a long season remaining here.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of discussion about, and again, what is determined in terms of the points. So if you're looking at Norris's infractions of what's major versus others, neglecting obviously a yellow flag is that or a double yellow flag, and again, or pitting on a red flag as he did at Baku on about a little over a month ago. At the end of the day, the standards are put in place for a reason. You still have to be aware of the situation, but also, the engineers, the team at McLaren, the race day team at McLaren has to be aware of these things as well. But it's such a fast sport, you just don't know where, you should have an idea of where he's at on the course. I thought the infraction in Austria, I thought was a bit much. I don't think it was...
Didn't deserve penalty points.
No, it didn't. It was just two guys, based off the line that Lando had versus Sergio. Sorry. I don't think it was necessarily worth it. And you get somebody like Sergio Perez, who got nailed twice in one race and has himself up to 8, with his... And Sergio had a couple moments in that race, right? I thought the first one... Not so much. The second one, I thought for sure was definitely a force off. So it's much more of a force off as I watched that. So it all depends, again, for those wondering about penalty points, again, it depends again on the degree of the infraction. Something minor like, say, ignoring blue flags during a race, which Sergio did back at the Spanish Grand Prix last year. You get points there, but it's not it's not terrible. It's always the bigger infractions in this case that you have to take a look at, the ones that are dangerous in this circumstance.
Yeah, like what happened. It turns out it wasn't Seb's fault in that qualifying incident with Fernando. Too many guys are slowing down, and part of that is track related. We've talked about that and that pit entry. But there's some contention amongst the drivers too about the gentleman's agreement. So I imagine in the drivers' meeting this week, there's going to be some conversation about guys jumping the line and trying to create gaps, and it's causing some really some unfortunate situations.
Yeah, agreed. And again, Seb, 6 points just this season. All of his, after Bahrain, he basically had 5 in one race. So, yeah,
it's going to be interesting.
It'll be very interesting. It will be.
All right. As I look for my pen, the time is now. The time is now to pick the podium.
All right.
So where we are right now is the standings are 19-10 in my favor.
Yes.
So we got to pick the podium for the British Grand Prix. Do you want to add a bonus in there, a 5-point bonus for the winner of the sprint race? Or do we not need to do that?
No, because I feel like the winner of the sprint race is probably going to be the winner of the race too.
It's going to be the same for me.
Exactly. So I'll go first here. So I'm gonna go out. As I stated in last week's show, I'd given Hamilton a possibility before of winning the previous race. At this point now, I'm not going to be picking Hamilton until I see him actually win a race again. So it will be Verstappen for me winning this race. I do think Hamilton being at home, I think he will finish second. And as much as I was leaning certainly towards Valtteri Bottas, and I think Val, he's got all to play for here. He's got to make things difficult for Mercedes going into the summer. So I think we're going to get a good performance out of Valtteri Bottas. That we will see some challenges for that third spot on the podium. I think there's a chance, again, the up and down of Ferrari, but I could see Charles getting in there potentially, and he could potentially steal a podium spot. Does Danny Rick finally get himself in play here and finally align himself with that McLaren Mercedes? But as much as this feels like chalk, I'm going to say Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas.
All right. So you got Max, Lewis, and Bottas. I have Max winning the race. I have a surprise at number 2. It's just a gut feeling.
Okay.
Pierre Gasly.
Oh, Gasly's another one I was looking at, but yeah, I'm gonna Gasly 2.
And then I'm gonna have Lewis 3rd in this race.
Lewis 3rd.
And then the battle for 4th will be between Bottas, Norris, and Sergio.
I feel like Lewis after last week, after finishing 4th, again, this seems to be a replay for me saying, oh, he's going to make a comeback. Oh, he's going to make a comeback. I feel like, I do feel like he's going to finish. I think he's going to finish on the podium. I do think he's going to finish 2nd in this race. And Mercedes, in order to keep this constructors race going, Bottas has to do what he did last week, or at least be on the podium for them to continue to have a chance here. Perez will put heat on him, I think, but Perez also tires again. It was a rough week again. It was a rough week for Sergio, and that kind of also makes things interesting, because if it is Gasly, and Gasly gets on that podium and finishes 2nd to Max, the old Red Bull teammates for half the season, it gets real. It makes Red Bull's decision making all the more complicated.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Last thing before we put a wrap on this episode 7 of the Stick to F1 podcast. F1 2021 has come out, and we had PJ and Lee Mather on a couple weeks ago. And anticipation of the game and talking about the game, I've got my hands on it. You've got your hands on it. Initial reaction?
I have it now on the PlayStation 5, so I'm pretty fortunate in that regard. So I feel like I've got the best version of the game. Last night I got a chance to, and you and I have a dichotomy of you are a wheel guy, and I was very interested to see how the PlayStation 5 controls were going to work on this race. And I have to tell you, the experience on it has been unreal. It is really dialed up. You could feel it in terms of when the tires begin to slip and when to compensate.
Seems like there's more understeer in this game.
There is definitely more understeer in this game, without question. The back end can certainly come out a little bit more. You have to take the track. You have to be the biggest thing I'm going to tell people, if you're going to be racing it and you did play 2020 last year, you should definitely get some laps in first. You will feel the curbs a lot more this year than you did last year. You will, if you hit it the wrong way, you will lose control of that car.
They will unsettle the car in a big way.
It's a weighted, again, there is a weight, I think, as well. I'm feeling it certainly with the PlayStation 5 controller. There's a weight to it. And as I'm kind of, I have only, you've done multiple, I know you've done multiple tracks. I have, since I finally got it, since I just got back from vacation, I just got it downloaded last night. So late last night and somewhat today. I haven't gotten to an active race yet. I'm going to probably do that maybe later on. Maybe later today, maybe tomorrow, just to kind of get a feel for how the racing is. There's some definite familiarity. I like the way the HUD is set up this year. I always used to move that thing to the center, and the fact that they moved it to the center was, to me, especially from a visual aid perspective, you don't want to keep your eyes off the middle there. Now, some people feel more comfortable with it on the right, but I need to know what gears I'm in this circumstance. If you do have the PS5, the haptic controls, especially when it gives you resistance.
Yeah.
Depending on how your car is going, I haven't had a chance. I know they've talked about that. You have a wheel. I'm going to see how that goes, and maybe on Sunday I'll be able to give you a little bit more feedback with regards to an active race.
Yeah.
In this circumstance, so far the tires are definitely more grippy. I like the tire model. I think it took a little bit to get used to, but I feel like but I can also see how you can wear those tires super quick. If you don't handle your braking properly. You could definitely fly out. You have to really adhere to the racing line, and you really need to make sure to hold on to the adage of slow in, fast out.
Fast out, yeah.
If you go in fast, hit the apex, and if you hit that and you short shift up, I think heading up into coming out of 2, 3, 4, depending on the type of turn that you have, you could get real good down. You can get some real good speeds down heading down the straights.
Yeah, the one thing I've noticed too, when trailing a car, I've only done one online race because I'm not ready to get frustrated yet. But I do like the fact that in the online race menu, you can put a message there like "clean drivers only," or "all welcome beginners" or whatever. If you post a race on there and you set up your race weekend or whatever you're doing for an online race, but I have noticed in some Grand Prix that I was just running just to kind of get used to tracks that the dirty air is way, way more unsettling to the car, making it more realistic than it was in F1 2020.
Absolutely. And
Definitely feel it.
again, based on your experience with it so far, and again, I have not yet, I'm going to get that experience for myself very soon, probably today or tomorrow in an active race to see. And I usually do, I'll do a sprint. I'll do an initial five lapper just to get a feel for, getting the elbows out and everything. And then after that, my usual length is 25% on a race to get at least the one in. It's just time frame for me to get a full lap, full race in, and that full experience. But I'm really curious as to how the main cars that I've used so far have very distinct feels to them, and I really appreciate that. The Mercedes feels a certain way, the Red Bull feels a certain way. I also got a chance. I used the Alpine. The biggest thing I love the sound, Jace.
The sound is so much better. It's so much more true to form.
The engine, I love the sound. It was good. It was good last year, but the high end whistle, that you hear,
especially on a Red Bull.
Oh God, yeah, and it's you get that, and the Renault I always said the Renault engine has a certain sound to it that's very distinct. That's very distinct versus. Yeah. I haven't yet raced a Ferrari yet, but I want to see how that sounds.
I always liked the Ferrari in 2020 because I felt like I could hear the engine better than I could in a Red Bull. The Red Bull was more muted to me.
Yeah.
In 2020, but this year it's a little bit different, and they do sound really good. They did a great job mimicking the actual engine sound, and the feel of it's awesome. It was a little different. I had reload wheel settings and everything in there, and throttle differential and bias. You're running a little bit more front bias in this one. I'm still playing with the diff a little bit to get that feel of what I like. Tire pressures are a little higher that you're running here, a little firmer.
Yeah.
But you're right that the curbs are really unsettling. Ones that you're used to taking, you can no longer take. I've noticed it at Austria too, in Sector 2 when you go through there and you're coming out to head into that last straight before the last two turns. That second, I forget what turn it is, maybe turn 6. If you get onto that curb, you used to use that just to rotate the car. Now if you get on that and you're on your throttle, you're out. Your back end's just flying right out from under you and lap over.
And I think it's a good idea that if you are wanting to get a feel for the track, I do, prescribe to a lot of the stuff from PJ with regards to his, recommendations of slowly working your way around the track. We're always so tempted, I think, to just get out there and just start
step on it and
go. But to do the track walk, to kind of roll your car around the track slowly. Don't worry about your times. Just look at things, where are landmarks at, where are certain curbs. Are they raised? Is there a sausage curb? Where you would go out? But yeah, the curbs can absolutely unsettle your car in ways that it didn't last year, and I appreciate that because you have to be thinking. I mean, listen, if you're trying to be the preeminent simulation for Formula One, you got to have that experience. You have to have that feeling in this circumstance, and I like the fact, especially and to dial up. Another thing PJ recommended in setting up on the controller is making sure that you have, the vibration set to maximum, because then you could feel everything going on with the car and the controller the same way you would if you're on the wheel, and you could feel sort of the vibrations. You go, okay, don't want to go over that, want to try to avoid that. And that's, as you go along, you get better and better with regards to understanding the track better and knowing where you can put your car and what it's capable of.
Yeah, I'm in the 700s right now, both Bahrain time trial and at Austria at the Red Bull Ring. So getting the hang of it a little bit. I shaved off a lot of time and go in and check out people's setups and in time trial, download their setup, then start tweaking it to what you like, what your feel is with steering and downforce. I've increased downforce on a couple of them because certain areas I like to run a little harder or come in harder or whatever it might be. So just
and
play
also.
with it.
Yeah, and also recommend one of the things that PJ mentioned that I definitely, because there's the one control where you can use your right stick to either look back, forth. You're not going to use that in the race. No. You're just not. So brake differential, anything along those lines that you can change, and you can change your brake differential quickly without taking your eyes off the track.
Yep.
And just having a quick change, moving it up, moving it down, especially when you're on the straight, you know you're coming up on something where it's going to be more difficult. Definitely look at PJ's controller setup if you're using, again, a controller in this case. He also has wheel setups as well, but I will tell you, it's hugely helped me with regards to where I was last year versus where I'm at now in terms of racing games.
Yeah, the last thing on it too is, you know, it's crazy because you want to like ladder up. That's what kind of PJ was saying. You know, watch other guys and put their telemetry on there and all that, and you just got to put in laps to get faster and realize where you can make, you know, create more speed. But it's been fascinating to play so far, and I'm really enjoying it, and I can't wait to get into even more races and pick up in some new leagues and all that stuff as well. So everybody check it out. It's F1 2021, and it's by Codemasters. It's a tremendous game, and the storyline mode is awesome as well. So that's going to put a wrap on this episode 7 of the Stick to F1 podcast. Everybody enjoy what's going to be a fascinating weekend of Formula One at Silverstone, 140,000 fans. Our first sprint race, and we'll break it all down after. So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you on the next episode of the Stick to F1 podcast.